Hey everyone, how's it going? It's the Orange and Black Insider. Once again, I'm Anthony Kazenza, and I am joined by my co-host Scott Schultze. Scott, how are you doing? Unfortunately, we can't see your beautiful face once again this week, buddy. But are you doing all right otherwise?
Yeah, as long as I can be heard, I think I'm happy.
All right. Well,
Well,
you
in
can't.
Ohio, Bengals are, well, I like to say Bengals are doing stuff, but anyway, save that for
Bengals,
another time.
Bengals gonna Bengal, I guess is what we should say. Again, this is the Orange and Black Insider, the Bengals podcast for Bengals fans. We thank you so much for joining us live via YouTube and via Cincy Jungle. Will be every broadcast we do is live, and we appreciate you joining us. We have a special guest this week. A friend of Cincy Jungle, a sometimes contributor there. He can also be heard with James Rapine, I think is the correct pronunciation. Another Cincinnati sports figure with ESPN 1530, and it's Joe Goodberry, draft expert, and a lot of you who are on Twitter know him, follow him, and we love your stuff. Joe, thanks for making the time for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's always nice to talk to you, Anthony.
Yeah. First of all, before we get into any of the draft talk, we were talking before the show started. Congratulations on the new addition to your family, man. You're a full-blown adult now. 3 kids. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's not as fun as you're making it sound right now, but but yeah, if you hear a baby crying in the background, that's the new one.
Yeah, you and I have the new dad bags under the eyes. Yeah.
That's not the lighting. Those are real bags.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining us. I know Scott and I have a bunch of questions. We also want to make this interactive to those who are watching us live. So if you have a question for Joe or a question for our segment at the end of the show when we do fan questions, definitely leave it in the YouTube chat. Leave it in that thread, the comment thread in Cincy Jungle, and we'll try and get to all of those that we can. Joe, there's so many places I could start with the Bengals and the draft. I guess I'm going to start off with the wide receiver talk. And from what I gather on your Twitter account, you are all in on Corey Davis, at least in this draft. I'm a bit more onto Mike Williams, just maybe for a little bit more of a pro-ready type of guy. I think there might be a tiny bit more upside with Corey Davis. People have their favorites. Why Davis for you?
For a few reasons. I think he is a better route runner. I think he's much more athletic. When I watch him, he moves, for a guy that's as big as he is, much more fluid, much more athletic than you would expect. When we see this every week when we watch AJ Green, a guy that size, and he's not Green size, he's not 6'4", but at 6'2" and some change, 215, he runs like a guy who's 5'10", 195. His quickness and agility. He looks like Chad Ochocinco in his routes and cutting. And after the catch, he's about as good as you can get for a college prospect coming into the NFL. He's going to catch those short passes, those quick passes the Bengals love to throw, and he's going to be a threat the Bengals don't have in terms of yards after the catch. The reason I like him more than Mike Williams, and especially for the Bengals, because I do like Mike Williams, it's just Mike Williams was the AJ Green of the Clemson offense.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, that's not a bad thing. But Green gets a lot of those one-on-one. He may not be wide open targets where Dalton's going to look out there and say, okay, I've got Green and I'm going to throw it up to him. That was Mike Williams in the Clemson offense. So when you watch that, he gets a lot of targets where he's not open. They're just throwing it up and giving it to him, giving their best guy a chance to make a play. I don't think he'd get those same opportunities with the Bengals. I think those opportunities are maybe 5 to 6 times a game, and those go to A.J. Green right now. So for the fit, I love Corey Davis for the Bengals. I even like John Ross. I wouldn't be mad if they took John Ross out of Washington with that 4.2 speed, and he really has that. He looks like Deshaun Jackson, blazing speed, going deep, great ball skills, but he's also a really good route runner and great after the catch. He's got a little Odell Beckham in him. I don't think he has the same hands, but movement skills, Antonio Brown type agility and explosion. That's a guy I'd like to have on the Bengals too.
So first off, Joe, thanks for joining us. Anthony did mention you on 1530 AM out of Cincinnati, which I have heard before. I think I heard you on there a couple weeks ago talking about Leonard Fournette. And the question I have is, I've on this podcast, anyone who has heard this podcast has heard me wax on and on about Joe Mixon and how much I love Joe Mixon as a pure talent. So the question I have is, if I understood correctly when you were on the radio, Leonard Fournette was a guy you were very high on the Bengals possibly taking at that with the first pick, that ninth overall. So the question I have is, and I'll admit I am not a professional draft scout, draft expert, just a casual fan watching the play. Whenever I see Fournette making his big plays, it seems that he's either getting great blocking or doesn't seem to be knocking over anyone other than little defensive backs as far as like the power. So what is it that people like me are missing? Because I know a lot of drafts people are really high on him, and I know some of our fans are really mixed on Mixon, Fournette, Cook, or whoever else, be it McCaffrey or whoever. So what could you tell us about Fournette that might help sway us that direction if the Bengals were to go with Fournette?
Yeah, and the question is a little bit more nuanced, or the answer is a little bit more nuanced, because while I think the Bengals probably like Fournette, and I think that he definitely could be an option at number 9 for them, I don't love Fournette. I do think Mixon is better. I think Christian McCaffrey is a better running back. I think Delvin Cook's a better running back than Fournette, especially when I try to factor in fit for the Bengals. The comparison between Jeremy Hill, and Leonard Fournette's going to be there because of the school. But it's also because of the same offense. They're running out of the same offense, I formation, follow the fullback, power run schemes. A lot of their runs, if you go back and watch Jeremy Hill's college tape, like you said, they're breaking through 8 in the box and they're taking it off 60 yards, and maybe they have to break an arm tackle on a defensive back. I think Fournette's a little more powerful. I do think he's faster. He's a little bit better of an athlete, but the same strengths and weaknesses are there for Fournette as they are for Jeremy Hill, where they're not going to fit in the Bengals the way the Bengals have played the last 5-6 years of being a spread offense, a quick timing passing offense that plays out of the shotgun. I think that's a big reason why Jeremy Hill doesn't fit with the Bengals lately, and why Jeremy Hill struggles as much as he does. I think Leonard Fournette would struggle the same way that Hill has if the Bengals want to keep that offense. I would say I think the Bengals are kind of searching for an identity on offense. I'm not sure, as they went through last year with the offense struggling as much as it did, I'm not sure they're ready to say we're a spread team that's going to put it all on Andy Dalton's shoulders. Maybe they watch Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys without the same offensive line and say, let's minimize the quarterback. Let's lean on a power running back that can carry it 25 times a game, and let's have a good defense, because I think the defense played well last year for the most part. If that's their plan, I can definitely see them taking Fournette at 9. You mentioned Joe Mixon, but I think Mixon on the field is the best running back in this draft. I think he's a top 10 player in this draft, just on the field and production wise. I think he'd be a tremendous fit for the Bengals. Athleticism, vision. He's elusive. He can break tackles. His route running and hands. He's a complete player, offensive player. And I think Christian McCaffrey would bring a lot to the Bengals, honestly. I don't think he fits at 9. I'm not sure if that value is there for a guy that's probably more of a passing game running back. I do think he can run between the tackles, but at the same time, I don't think I'm giving it to him 250 times in that scenario. So I don't know if he's worth the 9th pick for the Bengals, but for a team that's in the 15s or 20s, definitely McCaffrey's probably a better option than Fournette in the top 10, where maybe the Panthers and maybe the Bengals that take him, maybe the Jets. I do think Fournette goes in the top 10. I'm not sure he's worth that for the Bengals.
Thanks, Stu. You had mentioned the offensive line earlier, so I'm going to flip it over to the defensive side and ask a question that has come up very frequently on Cincy Jungle, and that is the idea of having a need at edge rusher, especially on the right side where Michael Johnson has pretty much struggled ever since he's been there. And then obviously have Goodberry, but the problem with Goodberry is he's kind of rotational. He's not really that pure speed edge kind of guy. Looking at the draft coming up in April, the biggest name, once you get past, obviously, the Browns probably going number 1 with the kid from A&M. You have guys coming up such as Solomon Thomas, who seems to be more of an inside guy if he falls to them. And then after that, the general perception is there seems to be a drop off with guys like Taco or Barnett out of Tennessee. Do you see the Bengals possibly taking a defensive end at number 9? And if they did, who do you think would be the best pick for them at that spot?
I actually think that's their preference. If the right defensive end is there, that's what I think they're gonna pick at number 9, or at least what I think they'd like to pick at number 9. Ideally, I think Solomon Thomas would be the perfect fit for them. He'd play right defensive end on base in the base 4-3. He'd kick inside the way the Bengals have done with Goodberry and before that Antoine Odom, Jonathan Fanene, Frosty Rucker. They've always done that with those guys, but this is like those guys on steroids. Solomon Thomas. He's athletic. He's strong. I think you watch his games in order, and he consistently got better, and it culminated in that last bowl game where he dominated. I think that's exactly who he could end up being, and his workout numbers just proved also, because I think workout numbers is a big thing for pass rushers. If you look at the top guys in the league, the guys that have over 12, 13, 14 sacks a year, combine numbers for some reason have a big correlation with pass rushers. So when you see a guy like Derek Barnett, who is highly productive in college in Tennessee, and you look at his numbers and his explosion is lacking, and his agility was there in the 3-cone, but you can tell that when you watch him on film and you go back, you say, yeah, he can get around the corner, but he might be snap jumping. He might be guessing the snap, and you watch his home games versus his away games. And I tell everyone to do this. Go to draftbreakdown.com. They've got videos of all these prospects, all their games. Watch the away games and watch the home games with Derek Barnett. The home games, he has the crowd on his side, and he's much more dangerous when he can jump the snap and time the snap and get around that corner, and offensive linemen barely get a hand on him. I think he needs to get stronger. I think his hands need to get better. I think he needs to learn a power move and an inside move. I think he's someone they will like because of his production. But at the same time, I think he's going to take some time, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and that's not rare for a pass rusher to need a year or two. But Derek Barnett is definitely a guy I think they would like, but may not be that instant impact guy. I think Taco Charlton fits what they like and what they have liked. And I thought his tests were okay, but he can play the left side, right side. He played a little bit inside also. For a big guy, he's explosive and played well against the run. I think it could be an option. I feel like it's a bit of a reach at 9 if Solomon Thomas isn't there to take the next defensive end. After Garrett and Thomas, probably the 2 elite defensive ends in this class, there's probably 8 or 9, maybe even 10 guys that are going to go in the top 60 picks at defensive end, pass rusher, edge rusher, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure I want to be the team that takes the first guy. There's a lot of pressure in that pick. You need to make sure you get it right. You can't miss. And the same guy may be there at 41, maybe not exactly Derek Barnett or Taco Charlton, but the same quality guy may be there at 41, whether that's Derek Rivers from Youngstown State, whether it's Carl Lawson from Auburn, a small school or a big school guy. 2 edge rushers in the second round. It could be Charles Harris from Missouri. It could be Takaris McKinley from UCLA because he had a shoulder injury. That gap is not large at all, if there is one. So I think they would like Derek Barnett, maybe even Taco, but if I could see them saying that same value is going to be there at 41 for defensive end, let's go wide receiver. Let's go linebacker. Maybe. I don't think they're leaning that way, but I think wide receiver, maybe it's Leonard Fournette, maybe it's O.J. Howard, just based on him being a top 10 player and a freak athlete and a guy that looks like he's could probably play alongside Tyler Eifert, allow a little bit more blocking. This is O.J. Howard, Alabama tight end. And if Eifert can't stay healthy, then he's your guy. So I could see it going a few ways, but defensive end, I think, is their preference. And if Solomon Thomas is there, I think that's a win for everyone.
We're talking with Joe Goodberry, draft expert, Cincy Jungle friend, long-time colleague in terms of writing and podcasting. Great to have you on, Joe. You can follow Joe at Joe Goodberry on Twitter, and he's got a lot of cool stuff that he puts up on his Twitter account, so follow him there. Joe, if you've got some extra time, we've got a couple of questions kind of from the listeners that are listening live here. It seems a couple of people have asked in our YouTube chat about Reuben Foster. And obviously, you mentioned that you just mentioned the edge rushers and Solomon Thomas, guys like that. The Bengals brought in Kevin Minter. they let go of Ray Maualuga. Kevin Minter seems to kind of be a younger and improved version of Maualuga, if you will. And, they kind of have a little bit of a vacancy on that other side. Now, there's also Vontaze Burfict and his issues of regularly getting on the field, whether it's suspensions, injuries, that sort of thing. On one hand, you look at it and you kind of go, well, maybe you froth at the mouth a little bit by having Foster, Burfict, and Minter in the middle of your defense next year. On the other hand, you've got Nick Vigil, you've got Vinny Ray. Wait, what's the value of him at number 9? Do you think he's in the? Just now, you kind of said he may or may not be in the cards. And what's your scouting report on him?
Foster's a guy I feel pretty confident in being a good player. I just don't know how great he'll be. You watch him on tape, and he's flying around, and he's athletic, and he's fast. He hits hard. He plays hard. The weird part is he was never part of a turnover at Alabama, never forced a fumble, never recovered a fumble, never had an interception. It kind of makes you think, will he be limited as just a tackle machine type guy? And if so, as an inside linebacker, maybe he can play a little outside. The way the Bengals play, mostly of their guys are playing inside. But maybe he's just a tackle machine. And if that's the case, is that worth the number 9 pick? Or do you want somebody better? Do you want Luke Kuechly? Do you want Patrick Willis? I think you would if you're drafting a non-pass rushing linebacker in the top 10. I'm just not sure that Reuben Foster is that guy. I do feel like he'll be good. I think the fit is weird for the Bengals. And as you said, they have Burfict and they have Minter. I like to think of the nickel defense as the base defense. 2 linebackers are going to play the majority of the game. For the Bengals, having those 2 guys are likely your nickel guys. I think they do want to get Nick Vigil into a little bit more of a role, more coverage role if possible. So I think that's somebody they want to work in, and maybe he's starting at Sam. Somehow Vincent Ray finds a way to lead the team in snaps every single year at linebacker. Somebody gets hurt, someone gets suspended, whatever the case may be, he's going to find his way on the field. I think they have 4 guys they like. I don't think Foster is the guy at 9. I'd be surprised if he was the best player available, and I'd be surprised if they thought the value was there at that pick. Linebacker is a need still, but I think it's a need to get an athletic guy that's good in coverage that fits with the other guys. They really need an outside linebacker or a nickel linebacker.
Yeah, more of a complementary type of guy in terms of his skill set rather than the big thumper types that they always seem to like. We do have another question for you and it's not so much Bengals related, but it's from Aaron Siegel. Joe, any prospects in the first round you feel should go way earlier than they're being projected to go this year?
We talked a little bit about Christian McCaffrey, and I do think he ends up going in the late teens to the 20s. If it's the right team that didn't have a running back or a weapon, a passing game running back, a weapon like that, he's probably going to end up being a top 12 player from this draft. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But because of the value of the running back, because it's probably deemed as being smaller and probably not an every down guy, he's going to go later. Maybe John Ross sneaks into the end of the first round. It's going to be dependent on his medicals. Every team's going to have a different opinion on his medicals, both legs, both knees. He's had a lot of issues. He's come back stronger every time, faster, jumping higher every time. But in terms of being a weapon, he's probably up there with anybody as an offensive weapon in this draft. I don't know if he goes even in the first round because of the medicals. He may, and he probably should, but even at number 9, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bengals saw that speed and saw it as a weapon to add to the offense. So that'd be the high point for him. But yeah, John Ross is a guy that I think will end up being a top 10, 12 player from this draft.
I want to welcome in Connor Howe, who is joining us a little late on the program, but obviously one of our regular co-hosts. And Connor, I believe you have a question for Joe Goodberry. Welcome to the show, first of all. And you're on with Joe, Scott, and I.
Yeah, what's up, Joe? We've gone back and forth on Twitter. I'm just curious because you've been kind of on that team of the Bengals should be open to drafting a quarterback potentially. Are there any guys after you've looked at the film that you would say this guy is worth the number 9 pick, even though we have Andy Dalton on the roster?
I wouldn't be confident in taking any of them at 9. My argument was more they should be open to looking. And when you hear Marvin Lewis say everything's on the table except for quarterback, that rubbed me the wrong way, because I feel like the only way you'll actually upgrade your franchise, your team, or maybe even the fate of where this team is going in the next 10 years, and it's just not the Bengals. It could be any team that's struggling right now. Any team picking in the top 10 should look at quarterback, because if you're the Bengals and the Panthers, you're not going to be there too often. I'm not saying the Panthers should upgrade from Cam Newton. I'm not saying the Bengals should upgrade from Andy Dalton. But if a guy was there and you're not going to pick top 10 for the next 5 years, hopefully, it may be worth that potential. And we see the way quarterbacks are valued in the NFL. You get one and you flip a guy for a first rounder later or multiple picks, it comes back and may be worth it. The only guy I think might be worth it is Mitch Trubisky. And I'm not sure if I would say I feel confident he's going to be better than Andy Dalton. He may be Andy Dalton. And for a lot of teams, that's good enough. For a lot of teams, they look at that and say, I'll take that guy in the top 10 and hope he's Andy Dalton and hope we get into the playoffs.
Scott Schulze again. I have, first off, I'd like to say thanks for putting a plug in for Draft Breakdown. I absolutely love that site. So it was good to hear someone else mention it. It is amazing how much video you can find on there. One last question I had for you regarding the Bengals picks. Last year, I think they surprised more than a couple people when they selected Nick Vigil as high as they did. He was kind of a surprise pick, smaller school, Utah State. Kind of taken a couple rounds before a lot of the so-called experts kind of had him listed, and then after the fact we find out the Bengals and a few other teams had him pretty much higher than a lot of the experts had him at. If you were to put on your prognosticator's hat, or I guess you have a hat on, I don't know if that's a prediction hat, possibly, who based on the Bengals history and kind of what direction you think they might be going, not going, and depending on who's there, who would you guess, or what are some names you would guess them to draft possibly earlier than the rest of the, everyone else following the draft would expect them? Someone that maybe they grab in an early mid round that makes everyone go, wow, what in the heck? I wasn't expecting them to grab that guy this early.
Yeah, that's a tough question, because you get in your own bubble of draft prospects and draft season where you're kind of not sure where guys should go. Right now, it's a weird draft because you feel like there's 50 or 60 guys that could go in the end of the first round, and it depends on where you have them graded, depends on where you have them going. And last year with Nick Vigil, I think it surprised us so much because they just took P.J. Dawson the year before in the third round. Little did we know that they kind of didn't like him, or he wasn't responding, whatever the case may be, or whatever happened. So it would be a situation like that I think would really surprise us, is that someone they drafted the previous year, whether it's a tight end in the second round, like a Bucky Hodges, Virginia Tech, and we go, oh, okay, they're taking a tight end, and here we go. Or maybe it's a Derek Rivers, defensive end. I mentioned him earlier, Youngstown State. They're there at 41, and there's guys like Carl Lawson and Tack McKinley and bigger names on the board. But for a lot of people, it'd be a surprise if a team took Derek Rivers ahead of them. But if you watch the tape, he's as good, or if not better, than a lot of them, and he tested phenomenally, and everything points to him being a very good player. Another guy I think that fits what they usually like at wide receiver is Texas A&M Josh Reynolds. It's a good receiver class, but I think if you start picking guys you like, or guys that you say, I need a deep outside speed guy, he's one of the few after you get out of the first round. And I could see them being there in the second, maybe at 41, maybe it's in the third round, but I could see them liking him a lot. He reminds me of Chris Henry. And if they took him over a couple other big names, I think that would surprise some people.
I've got one more question for you. And I think Draft Twitter has this interesting fascination with McDowell, who doesn't really, for whatever reason, get talked about that much with Bengals Twitter and Bengals, comment sections, all this stuff. What's your opinion of him? Where do you think he's going to go? Do you think, the Bengals would consider him at defensive end? Because I know he played inside and outside a lot.
What was the name? I missed it.
Malik McDowell.
Oh, Malik McDowell. Yeah, I don't know if he's as good as a lot of draft Twitter likes him. He's kind of a tweener. of that defensive end, defensive tackle. A lot of guys like that in the NFL right now. I think of Sheldon Richardson from the Jets when I watch Malik McDowell. And you may say that's a good thing, but Richardson is so misused with the Jets at times. Half of his snaps being at defensive end really kills any of his productivity. I think you would get that a lot with McDowell. There's a lot of questions with his concern or with his character, concerns with his motor. He may be there at 41. Now, the Bengals do need an interior pass rusher and nickel if that's all they're going to use him for. And I think the value would be there as a second-round guy if that's the role you have for him. I could see that being the pick, and he could definitely help out. I don't like him. He could have had a chance to be like the number 9 conversation, I think, had he answered questions correctly and really atoned for some of the mistakes and some of the calling out of his own teammates and players and coaches. But he didn't do that at the combine. He kind of tanked it and bombed a little bit. So I think that's going to knock him back on a few boards. Based on the tape and based on the measurables, you would think he could be a top 15 player. He's probably not going there. He's probably going 25 to 45.
Joe, I'm gonna combine a listener question along with one of my own here. Again, we're talking with Joe Goodberry, draft expert. Find him on Twitter at Joe Goodberry. And then we'll get you out of here. You've been on and you've been gracious with your time. You've been on for a little while here, and I appreciate it. Michael Myers in our chat, and I don't mean to laugh at a guy's name, but you hear the name and you think of the movie Halloween. But Michael Myers in our chat, YouTube chat, had mentioned that who would you like to see the Bengals take with their second-round pick? Obviously, that's predicated on who they take with their first-round pick and what position they go there. So I'm just going to put you on the spot here and ask you who you think the Bengals' first 3 picks, either players or positions, whatever you think currently. Right now, personally, I'm a little bit more on, let's go a little bit more on offense than defense, because I agree with you. I saw some good things from the defense at the end of the year. It was the offense, especially when injuries hit, that really struggled. But that's me, and I want to ask you what you think maybe for the first 3 picks or so, either names, positions, or both, if you've got them.
I definitely think they need a defensive end. I know they can go out there with Michael Johnson another year and probably put him out there for another 900 snaps the way they've been doing it and probably get a little production out of him, but he'll be a guy they can trust and count on. I think they still have a gap as the third defensive end, whether that's Will Clark or it's Wallace Gilberry. They let Marcus Hunt go. I think that's a 500 snap position, pretty much a starter for them. I think they want to fill it with defensive end and surround it with some offensive picks, because I think the offense really lacked last year in a lot of ways. And if it's not going to be on the offensive line, because I really feel like they have their guys there that they think are going to be the starters and think are going to contribute, I think that leaves them with running back and wide receiver. So I definitely think in some order that'll be their first 3 picks. And now it all depends on who's there at 9. I think they want a defensive end. I think they would like Solomon Thomas to be there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they like the production of Derek Barnett. They like the way he looks. They'll say the 3 cone's good enough, and they'll say we have the luxury of letting him develop for a year or 2 behind Michael Johnson while giving him a few snaps here and there. And I see them going in that direction. If let's say Derek Barnett is the first pick. Today, Tony Pauline reported that the Bengals are targeting Joe Mixon in the second round. That's something that's something I heard a few weeks ago, and really didn't say anything because I don't know if I wanted it to be true or not, because everyone's got a different feeling about it. But if that's the case, it seems like they're targeting running back. Another one I heard that they really like is Alvin Kamara, running back out of Tennessee. If those are the 2 guys they like, it seems to me they want to continue to be a passing offense. They want to play out of shotgun. They want a guy that can pass protect, a guy that can run routes and do a lot of what Giovanni Bernard does. But with him being hurt, with that being the core of their offense and how they play offense, I'm not surprised that those are the 2 guys they like. I could see them going into the second round and saying, we're hurting on the offensive line. We need to get a running back that can create a little bit more than Jeremy Hill has been able to. Let's take one of these guys that's there at 41, whether that's a Kamara, whether that's a Joe Mixon, if that's how it goes down. And I think that's where they go. They target running back in the second round, come into the third, and I think they go wide receiver. Now, there's going to be – I don't know who's going to be there. It seems weird because a lot of guys I like, whether it's Josh Reynolds, whether it's Carlos Henderson, whether it's Chad Hansen, all of them have a chance to go in the top of the second round. I think all of them have a chance to be there at the end of the third. So it's kind of hard to be sure of what they want in that position. I do think they want a deep speed guy, but it also feels like they want a gadget guy, a guy that replaces maybe like what they had in Andrew Hawkins. They seemed interested in Curtis Samuels from Ohio State. He would be that kind of guy. Now, do they go get a gadget guy where you just get the ball in his hands in the top of the third round? Maybe. I think that's more of a later or mid-round pick. I still think with top of the third round is a premium pick, and that's where I'll say they go with a Josh Reynolds, a wide receiver of Texas A&M. He'll be a tall, lanky, outside speed guy. Looks a lot like Chris Henry, moves like AJ Green. I can't imagine they watch him and say he's not a Bengal receiver. So let's say they go Derek Barnett. I think Mixon's gone before 41. So let's go Elvin Kamara out of Tennessee, and then Josh Reynolds in the third round wide receiver, Texas A&M.
That wouldn't be a terrible haul from a number of different perspectives. And, I think obviously we know that the Bengals don't like to maneuver at least forward in the draft. They will maneuver back, collect picks, but, they don't like to move up. So anyways, Joe, you've been awesome. Thanks for the time. I know you've got some home projects to get to. You were talking about before the show. Appreciate it. Where just for our listeners, where can they find your stuff? Where can they get access to all of your draft knowledge and all that good stuff?
The best place is Twitter. That's been my blog lately. I just put most of my stuff there. I do some scouting for Bleacher Report, but if you look on Twitter, at Joe Goodberry, just the way it sounds is the way it's spelled. I like to interact. I like to talk Bengals, so find me on there.
And you know what, Joe? This is great because last week we had this discussion for Scott Schulze. He does not have a Twitter account. He writes some great stuff. He puts some stuff on Cincy Jungle. He does not have a Twitter account. So now this is a great way to reel Scott into the world of Twitter.
Twitter is awesome, especially for sports and especially for branching out and meeting people and getting opportunities with other people. You can talk to players, agents, sometimes even coaches are on there, whether it be or another writer or a scout. It's fun. It's a good time. It's good information.
And you, myself, and Connor Howe wouldn't have met, quote unquote, met without Twitter. So Scott, you got to get on the ball, buddy.
It just sounds like you guys are trying to make me get rid of my rotary dial phone.
Maybe. Joe, thanks a bunch.
Gosh.
Thanks a bunch, buddy. Maybe if you're willing, either right before the draft or after the draft, once the Bengals get their picks in and everything, maybe if you're willing, we'll have you on again and we can examine what they did.
Yeah, let's do it. And if they really tank it, then we'll have to crack open the hard stuff and do the show.
Gosh,
that would be that would be a fun show. That would be a fun show.
Oh no!
All right. Well, appreciate it, Joe. Congratulations on the new addition to your family, and take care. We'll still be talking to you on Twitter, buddy.
All right, guys. Take care. Everyone, keep up the good work.
Joe.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
That was Joe Goodberry, draft expert, and a really cool guy. He spent a ton of time with us, and I think everybody kind of prides themselves on being a quasi expert or being at least somewhat educated in the draft. Joe, whether you agree with his opinions or not on certain players, Joe puts in a lot of time watching game film, college game film, pro game film, and he does know quite a bit about what players could fit specifically with the Bengals. He does also do some stuff in case anyone follows the Bills. He lives in kind of the near Buffalo area, so he does know quite a bit about the Buffalo Bills specifically as well. But for the most part, knows a ton about the draft and very entertaining chat. And we're very excited to have him on the show. We were glad that he could carve out some time and take some fan questions. So appreciate all of the interaction in our chat rooms as well, guys. We're gonna switch gears a little bit from the draft, and I know there's a ton of topics, especially with some of the recent comments from Marvin Lewis, Mike Brown at the annual owner meetings. I think we'll table the Mike Brown stuff that came out on Wednesday for maybe some future topics, especially with the Joe Mixon stuff. But there's been a little bit of talk with if the Bengals are in rebuild mode or if they're maybe just merely retooling. And, Marvin Lewis didn't, he came out and he said, that we're not rebuilding. We're not in a rebuild mode. 2011 was the rebuild mode. Right now we're kind of just, we're getting younger. It kind of happens. It's cyclical in the NFL. Connor, what do you think? I mean, the Bengals have Andy Dalton locked up long-term. They have AJ Green locked up long-term. They do have Burfict and Eifert that are looking at contracts, their contracts being up next year, but they do have Geno Atkins under contract. So they have some of their guys, their main guys, under contract for a while. Dunlap. I don't know. Wait, do you think we're in full-blown rebuild mode when we look at the Bengals, or do you think that this is more, hey, let's really try and get the bang for our buck with these 11 draft picks and see what happens?
I think, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to disagree with Scott on this because I read what he wrote, and I don't know if what exactly I saw from him, but it's fine. I think most fans are going to disagree with me on this, but I don't think the Bengals are in rebuild mode. I don't think they're close to being in rebuild mode. Like you said, they have all these players, and people are going to just write it off as, oh well, Iloka and Sean Williams are both good, but they're not elite. AJ Green's elite, but who's next to him? Even though the Bengals just addressed the position at receiver last year in the draft, Kevin Zeitler and Andrew Whitworth both left. Never mind that the Bengals have guys in place for when they were supposed to leave. Granted, we haven't really seen anything good from those guys yet, but the Bengals for their departure, so to speak. And then, you have like Eifert and Burfict with a ton of cap room to do extensions if they want to extend those guys. At the end, you have a team with the quarterback that it believes it's its franchise quarterback. Jeremy Hill, Gio Bernard have both been, less than ideal, just for lack of a better term. They're both still pretty good at, certain, like they both have attributes that are both really, top level in some areas, but they're both also not the explosive, like incredible players that we thought they would be coming into the league. And just overall, the Bengals have, now they have a coaching staff with like more than half of the staff is going into at least year 2 with them. It's just that, there's a lot of question marks, which makes it easy for people to say that it's a rebuild. And the Bengals are coming off a 6-win season, which again, it makes it easy to say they're in rebuild mode. Never mind that one of their games is a tie, which if you make that a win, it's just only a 7-win. I mean, it's just a matter of opinion on this one. But I think that you look at the Bengals, and even you look at the draft right now with, what are the biggest draft needs for the Bengals? And a lot of fans are saying, middle linebacker is a big need for the Bengals when the team already has Vontaze Burfict, Kevin Minter, and Nick. Just the linebacking core in general. The Bengals are 4 deep at linebacker at least, unless you think PJ Dawson or Marquise Flowers can come in and contribute, and then they're even 5 or 6 deep. So, and then you have defensive end. Defensive end is really the only position I would say where the Bengals really and maybe defensive tackle too if you're not on Team Andrew Billings at this point. But there's really not that many positions on the draft where the Bengals have serious holes. And I was just having a conversation on Twitter today with a guy who was saying, the Bengals don't. He was kind of criticizing the Bengals, saying they don't ever bench guys mid-season for guys that are below them on the depth. And that was kind of his argument for saying that the Bengals, they play veterans for too long. They don't ever let their young talent play, which kind of goes in the whole Adam Jones thing. But my point being that the Bengals don't have these holes to fill. Like, they're a solid team from top to bottom. If Adam Jones wasn't on the roster, you have William Jackson as a first-round pick who's probably going to come in and start. Now you have 2 guys who can start: William Jackson, Josh Shaw, Darquez Dennard, Bene Ben-Wickery, and Kivari Russell. That's like 6 at cornerback. They're probably not going to take a cornerback in the draft, or at least they don't have to. At safety, they're 4 deep with Iloka, Williams, Fedulum, and Duron Smith. The fact that people are taking kickers in the 4th round of a mock draft just goes to show the Bengals really have a deep roster. And now they have a coaching staff with a little more continuity than what it had last year. So I guess, bottom line, I just don't think they're rebuilding. I don't think they're close.
So, and I I get what you're saying, and I'm going to kick it over to Scott here for his take. You know, I get what you're saying, Connor, about like, oh, the Bengals don't have a ton of needs. I get it, but at the same time, they do have some places where, yeah, they need improvement. There's kind of two schools of thought here, Scott, and one of them is kind of what Connor was saying is the needs are there, but they seem to be supplemental positions. Another outside wide receiver opposite AJ Green, another defensive tackle, another maybe rotational defensive end that could become a starter down the line. There's kind of more, not necessarily immediate starter needs, which is good. But there are some worrisome spots as well. And then there's the other field of thought when you say, okay, really over the past calendar year, the past two off seasons, the Bengals have lost a number of quality starters, rotational guys, things of that nature, and have not done enough in free agency, definitely, maybe even the draft last year, to remedy that situation. So where do you stand on this, on the rebuild / retooling status of the team?
You pretty much nailed it, I think, from those last 2 points about the players they've lost and the lack of replacing them. If you look at, I guess what I would consider a rebuild is, first off, you have to have something that's built. And okay, 5 straight playoffs, 12-4 a couple years ago. That's obviously a built team, a very good team. Then you have to bring in the wrecking ball or the thermite or TNT and bring it down. And as you mentioned, they did. They lost a lot of free agents. They also lost a lot of coaches, offensive and defensive, top coordinators, assistants, and now we see them as coaches throughout the league. So you've lost a whole lot. And then the question is, okay, so you have something built, you bring it down. What are you doing to bring it back up? And that seems to be the one piece that's kind of missing. It's like, okay, we have LaFell. Okay, we added Mentor, but that's the guy Arizona didn't want because they wanted Dansby, or so forth. Or we typically bring in a Bullock or an AJ Hawk. It's not, that seems to be the piece that's missing. But that being said, generally a rebuild, at least in my opinion, is more like what the Browns do, where you're just perennially horrible. So you're constantly you're trying to build from the ground up. And I don't think the Bengals, even with all those losses, I wouldn't say they are at rock bottom. I don't think they are, in threat of being a 1-win, 2-win team because of the reasons Connor mentioned. They have a lot of good pieces. You don't have Atkins and Dunlap and Dalton and Green and, only win one game. So that being said, I don't quite see them in rebuild mode because I don't think they've fallen enough to be to that point. But I can't say I see them as a retooling team either because I think a retooling team is, okay, we're just going to tweak the dial. We're getting back to that 11, 12 win type of team that can push for a playoff spot and even have a bye, and a team that is expected to do really well in the playoffs. And that's the one thing I don't see because I think they lost too much that they haven't replaced to just say, yeah, we are retooling from that 12-4. But at the same time, I don't think they've hit rock bottom to be rebuilding. So I guess my answer would be both or neither, because I think they're kind of somewhere in between the two. I don't know if there's a third option, but if there is, I think that's the choice I'd go with.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there, Scott. I guess I would say see all of the above, right?
Basically.
I do have kind of a little bit of the optimism that Connor has with especially when you compare it to 2011. I mean, in 2011, they lost their star receiver, they lost their quarterback, and people were talking about this team falling apart and being one of, if not the worst team in the league in 2011, and they snuck into the playoffs. This year, even though they've lost a lot of guys, it's more, yes, there's some starters, but they are guys in their 30s, even close to their mid-30s that they've lost. They're getting a little younger in certain areas. I mean, I think the whole thing here is when you look at letting Domata Peko walk, and you let Ray Maualuga go, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this too, but it might be a little bit of addition by subtraction. And I liked both of those guys. I think they had a few nice years with the Bengals. I mean, they were up and down sometimes, but they seem to be solid guys for this team and solid players, and they were on so many playoff defenses on this team. So, it's hard to totally hate on them, even though some of their play towards the end of the year wasn't absolutely fantastic. But, I'm kind of in the middle as well. I think, as long as you have a quarterback and you can have your criticisms about Dalton, he's made Pro Bowls, he's played pretty well the past 2 seasons. As long as you have that, you have a couple of core defensive players and a star receiver in place. It's more the ancillary stuff at this point. You can talk about improving the offensive tackle positions. Obviously, that's on the table, but the Bengals are committed to Cedric Ogbuehi and Jake Fisher on the outside spots this year, and they're going to kind of live and die with that. So, I'm kind of with you, Scott. I'm a little bit in the middle here. Connor, real quick, just quick thoughts on the Bengals cutting Ray Maualuga. Good move, expected, unexpected. What do you think?
Okay. So are you saying what's the thought on Ray Maualuga cut? I guess, it was just a predictable move. We saw it coming. I think I incorrectly, maybe even last show, said that I think he was going to stick around at least until training camp, but then eventually probably wasn't going to make the roster. I was wrong, and I'll eat crow. I don't know where crow is, but I'll find some.
Please don't. At least not literally.
No, I think we kind of talked about it last episode. It just seemed like his time is kind of running out in Cincinnati, and the Bengals, even if they didn't bring in Kevin Minter, they really could have dealt without. They could have done without him. They had Tez and then Kevin Minter. They could even have put Vinny Ray into the starting lineup with Nick Vigil, because I think, like Joe says, Vinny Ray plays like 1 million snaps a game, so it makes sense that for Maualuga, his $3 point whatever $million price tag didn't carry the weight of. Okay, well, even and it's not even really Maualuga's fault, because he's a good enough player that he's going to find a home for another team. I think he just visited the Chiefs today. But you don't sign a middle linebacker who's just a pure run thumper for $3 million in a season. And granted, the Bengals kind of saw his decline, so to speak, but really more than his decline, just his lack of the lack of importance for his position on the roster coming. Hence, they're making his entire 2017 roster salary, whatever. Basically, they wouldn't lose any money by cutting him. They kind of knew that was this was the time they were going to make that move, and they made it. And so we hope Kevin Minter is going to be great. I think fans are overvaluing what he brings to the team, and I think fans are undervaluing what Carlos Dansby brought to the team. I think that it's going to be interesting to see where everyone fits on the field next year with Burfict and then Minter, Vigil, and then potentially a rookie if the Bengals do draft Foster, which I don't think is going to happen, but and Ray. It was a move that I kind of saw coming. The most surprising thing to me when he got cut was him and Vontaze Burfict had that hair thing where they said they were both going to shave their heads during the beginning of the year. Did Ray Maualuga ever shave his head, man? I'd kick him off the team just for that. Didn't follow through.
I thought they did. I don't know. I could be wrong, but yeah, they.
Vontaze did, but Ray, I guess his hair could have grown back, but he did. I don't remember him having that short hair.
He might have just kind of clipped it. I don't think he
skipped the line.
Fully, yeah. Scott, your thoughts on Ray Maualuga being cut by the Bengals, and are you surprised? What do you think?
I'm surprised pretty much for the reasons Connor said, and I do think maybe when Ray said he would cut his hair, maybe he just meant 2 of them, a couple strands, maybe not the whole entire head.
That's the move of a guy with that hair.
So yeah, I was surprised too, only because they have these guys that they just refuse to let go. They held Chris Crocker forever, Robert Gathers, D'Amato Pecco, Mike Nugent, but I think we've kind of seen this year, for whatever reason, they seem to finally be moving on from some of the dead weight a little too late, but not, horribly too late. They did finally get rid of Mike Nugent midseason. They didn't sign D'Amato Pecco. They didn't pull Robert Gathers out of retirement. So I think there is a chance that maybe there's a sign of optimism that so I was surprised, but maybe we shouldn't have been with everything we've seen that, hey, maybe this is a team that isn't going to put, a kind of a middling washed up veteran over younger players.
Yeah. Like I said, when we talked about Kevin Minter with Joe, Minter seems to kind of be a little bit of a new and a younger and improved version of Maualuga, not necessarily the absolutely dynamic linebacker that maybe even Vontaze Burfict is. But, I think if he can provide a more sustainable type of presence in the middle, and Scott, last week, he really broke down well the amount of snaps Maualuga had and all of that. And when we talked about Minter signing, and little did we know that Maualuga's being waived, it was coming down the corner there. But at some point, you got to see what some of these young guys have. I think it's time now for Andrew Billings to step into that Pecco role. I am very, very hesitant, and unfortunately we didn't get it on the air, but Joe Goodberry and I did talk before the show, and we were kind of just chatting about the Bengals, and he and I both are very hesitant about the possibility of Cedric Ogbuehi even coming anywhere close to what Andrew Whitworth can bring at the left tackle spot. So, we'll see what this team is, if they're getting younger type of thing is really going to pay dividends. I think it will, in terms of Ray Maualuga and potentially Andrew Billings on that defensive side, as we've been talking about. So we'll see, though. We'll see. If you have questions, comments, or want to download this show, you can do so in a number of different ways. We are on iTunes. So download us there. All of our content is on YouTube, and we are live every week there. So please download the videos there. We're on SoundCloud. You can download all the audio clips there. We're on cincyjungle.com. So check out all of our content there, as well as all of the written content that we have updating you on all things Cincinnati Bengals at that website. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Bengals OBI, and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. We've got email questions already that have come this week. We've got questions that have come in the YouTube chat already. So definitely appreciate all of the feedback and all of the support you've shown us. We are live, as I mentioned earlier, every show we are live on YouTube and at Cincy Jungle. So join us live if you're able to, and submit a question, chat with some fellow Bengals fans, and have a good time. We love having you guys join us live. That's one of the most fun things about this show that's now. And gosh, I think what are we, 6-7 months old now? We're almost veterans now. I can't believe it.
That's
guys.
Weird.
I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it, Scott?
Scott, tell us it's weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
Okay. Yeah, it's weird. All right. So with that being said, by the way, we are taking fan questions later at the end of this show, as we normally do. We've already got some. We'll try and squeeze in as many as we can. But if you've got some, please submit them via Cincy Jungle or YouTube. Appreciate that. Let's see here, guys. The next thing that we have coming in, the next segment, I guess we could call it, is really we love to kind of celebrate holidays and talk about little mini holidays, if you will. And the next one, I guess, that's on the calendar is April Fools. And with April Fools coming right around the corner, and probably by the time you download this show, it might have already come. So don't fall for any tricks, guys. Let's talk about how the Bengals might fool us. Probably this off season, I think, is how they're going to fool us. And there's so many ways we could go. Scott, I have a feeling that this was your creation in terms of a segment. So I'm going to let you go first on what do you think the Bengals are going to fool us on this off season?
Yeah, and this is one where I'm kind of looking at possible headlines and which one would be the most foolish. And for those of you, yeah, as you mentioned on the calendar, obviously April Fool's is coming up, or it's in the past, depending on when you're listening to this. Or if you are one of our truly devoted fans who listen to this multiple times, maybe you're watching this before and after April Fool's. But yeah, it's an interesting holiday. It goes back to who knows how far, at least to the 1390s, if not older. But with that being said, there are a lot of potential headlines that we could see on Cincy Jungle regarding the Bengals in April. So what I wanted to do was throw 6 different possible headlines out. And of these 6, which one would you consider the most foolish, or you would seriously hope was an April Fool's joke and not a real headline? So basically, which of these headlines would piss you off the most as a Bengals fan? If this were to happen, you would just be, I sure hope this is an April Fool's joke. They better not have done X. So here's the 6, and I'm going to let Connor and Anthony chime in on which one would absolutely be the worst, the one that you absolutely would not want to see happen. So these are Bengals decisions that they come out with in April. One of them, the first one is Marvin Lewis gets another contract extension. Second one, Bengals draft Joe Mixon, either first or second round. I know some people love him, some people hate him. Bengals don't cut Adam Jones. The fourth one, the Bengals get offers for McCarron but don't trade him. Let's say decent offers, second round pick, second and a fourth, second, whatever, solid offers, decide to hold him. The fifth one, one that Roy hasn't come up, but is a possibility, especially if McCarron gets traded, is the Bengals sign Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, wow.
And that's one. I know some people, it depends on what you feel on the whole kneeling thing. And then the last one is the Bengals draft another cornerback in the first round. So if those were 6 possible headlines you were to see on Cincy Jungle, which one would you so much that you absolutely hope would be an April Fool's joke that we were playing on our readers?
So, okay, are you wanting, just so I'm clear, are you wanting these ranked, or are you wanting just maybe the...
No, just the one. Okay. If you were to pick one that you absolutely would never, you would not want to see that come to fruition.
First of all, hell of a list, man. I mean, that's incredible.
I don't know where you found these.
Yeah. So just to recap real quick for the listeners, these are the options of what we would hope to not see as headlines on April Fool's Day on Cincy Jungle or the other media platforms. We have Marvin Lewis gets a contract extension. Bengals draft Joe Mixon in the first or second round. Bengals don't cut Adam Jones. Bengals get solid offers for A.J. McCarron but don't trade him. Bengals sign Colin Kaepernick. Bengals draft first-round cornerback. Wow. If we're kicking it to me, I'm going to say the oh man, that's tough. I'm going to say the top 2 that I don't like is Marvin Lewis extension and Bengals don't cut Adam Jones, because right now I'm getting the feeling that they are going to draft Joe Mixon. And to me, if you draft a guy like Joe Mixon and you keep Adam Jones on the roster, you're sending a very, very poor message to the team. If you're management, I mean, it's kind of like, hey, you screwed up multiple times. Fine. We'll let it slide. It's fine. So that, or the Lewis extension, I've talked about this ad nauseum. I mean, I think the last couple of years should have been a prove it year for Marvin Lewis, and him getting an extension, which, by the way, if you haven't seen, go to Cincy Jungle. There's a lot of interesting quotes from Mike Brown at the owners' meetings this week, and one of them is the fact that he's having dinner with Marvin Lewis and might be talking about an extension, believe it or not. So check that out and try and hold down your dinner if you can. But those are the 2 I think that I wouldn't like to see. I mean, Joe Mixon is kind of along the same lines as Adam Jones, I guess, in terms of character and all of that. So, I mean, I guess those are kind of the ones I'm looking at. What about you, Connor?
I'm just going to go through really quick and just kind of give my whole reasoning for why I would choose the one I'm going to choose. So, Bengals drafting Mixon, I'm okay with because he's a good running back. But, I mean, is what it is. Same thing with Bengals. Don't cut Adam Jones. He's a good cornerback. They're both good football players. It seems like the Bengals really, whether you like this about them or don't like this about them, they really feel like the whole like team is a fam. They have the team as a family vibe, which having been in another team building, I can say is actually like for me at least, it felt like a positive attribute to have. And things are certainly different when it's a guy like Adam Jones versus a less controversial player, but whether you love him or hate him, Adam Jones still a good football player. So him and Mixon, I'm okay with. Bengals get decent offers from McCarron. Don't trade him. I mean, if they view him as the backup, and you saw the Bengals, stuck around with the Steelers in that game in 2015 in the playoffs. Maybe they think that McCarron's improved even more and is so good that he could potentially either, and I don't want to get into hot take territory, but he could be like the best backup in the league, or potentially, something happens to Dalton, he can start, whether it's like a freak Teddy Bridgewater accident. It's always good to have good quarterbacks on your team, so I don't hate that. Number 5, if the Bengals sign Cap, I think a lot of people will have a problem with that. My one thing would be is that if they sign Cap, they probably traded McCarron, which I don't hate. Cap isn't going to start, and he's still a pretty good player. People are going to have their problems with him, as the whole the controversy surrounding him for whatever reason. But if you sign him, you're probably trading McCarron, so you're probably getting, if you're signing Cap, you're probably getting at least like a 3rd round pick, if not better, for a compensation for signing him. So that makes sense. And then the Bengals draft a 1st round cornerback. You could probably make the argument the Bengals are the first team out of any team to draft a cornerback in the draft, and maybe that cornerback's Malik Hooker, who can play cornerback or safety. But regardless, if it's Hooker, Lattimore, or just another talented cornerback, I don't hate that. Number one thing for me, in case by deduction you haven't figured it out by now, is Marvin Lewis extension. And I think it's interesting because me personally, if you've interacted with me on Twitter, I think a lot of people have called me a Marvin Lewis defender, so to speak, or someone who, which I wouldn't consider myself that by any means. I think it's just the notion that me not saying we should fire Lewis, and we should have fired him 3 years ago, that makes people put this label on me. But if you look at Marvin Lewis and the 2016 season, what about the 2016 season makes, Marvin Lewis a guy that you have to keep around? And again, I think he's a good coach. I think he's an average or better coach, and I've said that, and people, read me for it. Whatever. You can say whatever you want to me about that. But rewarding a 6-7 in one season, or what was it, 6-9 in one season? Oh gosh, 6-9 in one season with a contract extension, it just doesn't make sense. This is the one year where, since 2011, Mike Brown really has a reason to not give Marvin Lewis that yearly contract extension. He didn't. You can make all the excuses you want, but at the end of the day, losing a playoff game is different than going 6-9-1. And some fans have seemed to think that losing a playoff game is worse than a losing season by this point, because they're so frustrated with Lewis, for better or for worse. But extending Marvin Lewis after a 6-9-1 season, with all of the questions surrounding the Bengals, just does not seem like a thing that you should do. That's the one thing that I really could not stand out of all 6 of these.
So Connor and I are in agreement. And Scott, before we get to you and put put you on the hot seat of your own question here, which, by the way, this is just like an unbelievable scenario. There's some really fun responses in the YouTube chat. Not so much of these options, but you have Waldo, who says no with capital N-O, not another corner. Aaron Siegel with the hot take: Bengals trade for Brandon Tate. That one's pretty
that's good.
Greg L in the chat says they signed Nick Mangold, Greg Hardy, and Mario Williams. Oh my!
The Greg Hardy is the issue, right?
Yeah, that's the one that really obviously sticks out like a sore thumb there. There's There's Michael Myers says no cap, no drama. So I don't know. What do you think, Scott? Let's turn the tables on you, my friend.
I guess I wasn't planning on answering my own question.
Oh, why not? Come on. That's not fair.
I think if I had to, like you said, put me on the spot. The one I think I would have to go unanimous with the two of you. And one way I'm looking at this is I'll kind of preface this with I've mentioned before I'm a UD Flyers fan. They just lost their head coach to Indiana. So not a big fan of Indiana right now. Not the state, just the school. But when you look at college basketball, you have mid-majors and teams from these little one-bid conferences. A lot of that, depending on which school you are, you might be okay with a coach who's decent. Who, this guy gets us to the tournament once every few years. We never win a game, kind of a thing. And there's a lot of schools that'd be really happy with that. If we could, we're a, the Horizon League or something, and hey, our coach gets us to the tournament once every 4 or 5 years, and maybe we'll get lucky and win a game at some point in the tournament. That'd be great. But the NFL's not college basketball, which just ended. You have I guess it hasn't just ended. I guess it's another week. But in the NFL, there's only 32 teams. You have higher expectations. And especially when you have that core of players that Connor, mentioned earlier, all those guys we have on this team, you have to do better than, the 0 playoff wins, the barely 500 record, the in-game management, just a lot of the things that Marvin Lewis has struggled with. So the one for me would be him getting another extension. And I know that for whatever reason, they seem to like him. I know he's done some good things. He turned the team around, but that was 15 years ago. At some point, you have to take that next step. And if you aren't taking the next step, you just have to move on. I mean, how many head coaches have we lost? I think the three of us, and probably a lot of fans would be happier to see coaching this team. I mean, a lot of people, I think, would be happier if Zimmer was there. There's probably a strong contingent who'd be happy if we had Vance Joseph, on staff, or even Gruden at this point. And I think a lot of, you just have to, you can't just kind of keep muddling on with mediocre. You have to make that, you have to take that risk and try something different, because you can't get better if you don't. And so that would be the one that would drive me crazy. All the others, I think I could live with. I don't think they're going to cut Adam Jones. I'd be cool with Mixon because he is the best running back in the draft. Another cornerback, if they truly feel that's the best player, then I can't grumble too much because I'm a best player available guy. Kaepernick, that is what it is. I mean, he's not, beating people up or getting thrown in jail kind of a thing. He could be a lot worse. McCarron, that would frustrate me, but if he is a restricted free agent, maybe you're holding out hope you get a better deal next year. I don't know. So for me, it'd be Marvin Lewis.
You know what I also like about these scenarios here, Scott, is a lot of them tie into each other. So if you look at Bengals don't cut Adam Jones and Bengals draft a first-round cornerback. Well, if they cut Adam Jones, they might draft a first-round cornerback. Bengals get decent offers from McCarron, but don't trade him. Bengals sign Kaepernick. Well, one of the, if they end up trading McCarron, maybe Kaepernick signs. You know what I mean? So there's kind of a lot of weird nuances with it. I really like it. Aside from the Brandon Tate headline, we have Kay Rhodes in the YouTube chat that says an April Fool's headline he would not like to see is the Bengals bring Mike Nugent to training camp. So good stuff.
That'll never happen.
Good stuff from you, Scott. Great stuff also from the YouTube chat members. That was hysterical and really a lot of fun. Let us know if what you would not want the Bengals April Fool's joke to be on you this year. You can get in touch with us at Bengals OBI on Twitter, the obinsider@gmail.com via email. You can leave comments, questions, ratings on our iTunes platform. You can find us there. We're on SoundCloud. We're on YouTube. And we're also on Cincy Jungle. So find us there, download us, and we appreciate the support that you've shown us over the course of this show. Guys, let's end up with our usual segment. We've got some fan questions, some of which have come via email, some of which have come in the YouTube chat and other areas. So let's try and get to some if we can here. let's start with there was one, I believe it was from Aaron in the YouTube chat. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but it has to do with Ray Maualuga. If he says, "Hey guys, with the release of Ray Maualuga, I'd like to know in your opinions if the Bengals could go back in time, should they still draft Ray Maualuga or choose someone else?" Connor, I am going to put you on the spot right there. Go for it.
Okay, so if you look back, Ray Maualuga drafted in 2009, right? With the where is it? He got picked with the 38th overall selection. So my answer is going to be no. And I think a lot of people are going to look back at, okay, well, you know, guys like Jarius Byrd, Connor Barwin, Max Unger, LaShawn McCoy, William Moore, Luis Vazquez, Mike Wallace, you know, Henry Melton, TJ Lang, Glover Quinn. That's like that's and then a couple more, you know, Pro Bowlers. So that's like 10 plus Pro Bowlers that got drafted behind, you know, Ray Maualuga. So hindsight's 2020, of course, you know, no, we should have taken LaShawn McCoy because, you know, the Bengals totally should have known that LaShawn McCoy was going to become this playmaker. No, my reason is because, you know, with a 47th overall pick, which was, 9 picks later, the Oakland Raiders selected a safety by the name of Michael Mitchell, who ended up making his way to Carolina and then to Pittsburgh, where, you know, now he's a member of the Steelers and is a player that I don't like. But, you know, maybe if the Bengals picked Mike Mitchell instead, I'd like him, and he'd be, you know, making a couple plays left and right. And I mean, I'm just kidding. That's my April Fool's joke. The Bengals definitely made the right choice with Maualuga. It's easy to say hindsight's 2020, but there were a lot of Pro Bowlers behind him, 2 of which played for the Bengals. I think Kevin Huber and Cedric Pearman. And Ray Maualuga had a good career. He played in Cincinnati for like 8
years,
like a while, 2009 to 2017. I can't even do math. However long that is, 8 years or whatever, it's 9 years maybe. He had a good career, and it's easy to say hindsight's. It's easy to make these, you know, claims that we should have taken this guy when hindsight's 2020. But at the time, the linebacker probably felt like the biggest need. I don't remember, and it just made sense. And for who he was, the Bengals got a pretty good value with him.
I remember being pretty ecstatic with the pick, Scott, and I hope Connor didn't steal too much of your thunder on this. I know you had a specific take on it, but I remember being pretty psyched about the pick because I'd seen a lot of Ray Maualuga at USC. It was interesting to me that year that he was like, of their major linebackers, he was the last one taken, with Clay Matthews and Brian Cushing going in front of him. Those 2 made Pro Bowls. Maualuga never did. But what are your thoughts on the question from Aaron Siegel here about Maualuga and if they could kind of go in the old DeLorean and turn back the clock?
Well, the thing for me, my take is the guy who I would pick is the guy who I wanted them to pick instead of Maualuga. Going back, I remember following that draft. I remember when they made the pick being kind of disappointed. So I had an opposite reaction as you did, Anthony.
Interesting.
The player who I wanted them to take at the time and would still like to see them take, if I could go back and change it, was Max Unger. Because they are a team that struggled blocking. They struggled in the middle of the line. They have struggled at center for whoever, you know, since forever. He was, from what I recall, the top-rated center, had fallen to the 2nd round. Like, this is the perfect storm. They desperately need a center. This guy is rated really high. He is falling in their laps. This is going to be wonderful. They're going to go pick him, finally address the middle of the line. They haven't taken a guard or center in the draft in forever, and they took Ray Maualuga. So I was not very happy with that decision. I wasn't that high on him. I remember going to camp that year, seeing a ton of number 58 jerseys. A lot of the fans were really high on him. I guess I didn't see what the excitement was. But, you know, as a fan, I hoped it would work out. And I also figured, well, we already had Dhani Jones in the middle, who I thought was a solid pickup from the Giants. And I think Maualuga had to play, it was the weak side for a few years, and then until he finally got in the middle because he couldn't unseat Jones. So, yeah, I mean, going back, I think I go back and pick a guy who I wasn't high on at the time. So I'm just going to stick with Unger because that was a guy who I wanted at the time. And, yeah, I think hindsight, it would have been nice to see that pick made.
Yeah, and there were a lot of good players to kind of come out of that draft. The Bengals got some good ones. Andre Smith finally molded into one. There's B.J. Raji, Brian Arakpo, Malcolm Jenkins, Brian Cushing, Jeremy Maclin. Alex Mack was another center. You mentioned Max Unger. Alex Mack was a guy. Percy Harvin. I mean, these are all guys who made the Pro Bowl. It was an interesting one as well. Local kid who went to Louisville was the center. Eric Wood, drafted at the end of the first round, a center. Pretty good player for the Bills there. Another good one. And then, of course, a guy they brought in for a recent meeting, and he went just it looks like about 8 picks later or so. Connor Barwin out of Cincinnati, the defensive end. That was another guy a lot of diehard Bengals fans wanted because of his ties to UC and his productivity. And he ended up having a pretty good career, and is now signed with the Rams. And that's it kind of is what it is. But the Bengals landed Maluga, and that's who they got at the top of the second round. Some people thought he might be a first-round pick that year. Didn't happen, and but they did get 8 productive years out of him. Well, for the most part, 8 productive years. But was a big piece of a defense that was perennially ranked in the top 10, especially under Mike Zimmer. So, good question from Aaron there. Let's go on to another kind of fun one from Waldo. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but especially with the NFL's change to the those color rush uniforms, which last year when we saw on Thursday night when the Bengals beat the Dolphins, we saw the Bengals kind of in those white and black jerseys, which I thought were pretty sleek, and still their orange and black helmets, which I think most Bengals fans absolutely love the orange and black helmet. But it kind of clashed a little bit with the jerseys. But Waldo asked, "Hey guys, just a quick question with the proposal the Eagles had of the helmets. Would you like the White Tiger Bengals helmets?" Obviously there's different uniform combinations and all of that. Scott, what do you think about changing the helmets at least once, maybe twice a year to that White Tiger look? And maybe matching not only the color rush, but maybe just kind of mixing it up with the other uniforms they have.
I'm a fan of it, and although my answer is probably going to be kind of off, my reasoning might be off the wall. The reason I'm a fan of it is, from what I recall, and this is without doing any research ahead of time, so I could be way off on this. From what I remember, the reason the Bengals have the name the Bengals is because the Cincinnati Zoo had a live birth of a Bengal tiger cub in captivity, or whatever. I think they're called cubs. I could be wrong on that. But they had, I think it was the first one, in the U.S. where they had a baby Bengal tiger born. And from what I thought, for some reason, I'm thinking it was a Siberian tiger, and I could be totally wrong, or maybe they had a Siberian tiger at the zoo at one time. And those are the color of the Siberian tigers are black and white. So I think it'd be kind of cool if that's how the team got its name. I could be wrong on how they got their name. Obviously, if it's Bengal tiger, not Siberian tiger, it probably wasn't Siberian. So I may have my history all messed up. But I thought they looked really cool. I wasn't a fan of I don't know why they had the little orange stripe in there. I think I'd prefer just like the solid black and white like we saw in a lot of the CGI pictures. But I like the idea. I think it's kind of a cool look. I mean, you see it in a lot of other sports where teams go with these alternate jerseys. I don't know if I'd be a fan of doing the Oregon Ducks thing where we have like 20 different versions, where we maybe have we have more jerseys in games. But, I think a second jersey would be kind of cool, or a second helmet. If it's something like that, I thought it was a kind of cool look. I think some of the fans were kind of hesitant when they saw the photo, but I think after the game, a lot of fans were like, yeah, that was really cool. I'd like to see that more often.
I like the color rush uniforms. It's obviously, selfishly speaking, one of the things that drew me as a fan to the team is their colors, their looks, and their helmets. Some people around the NFL think they have some of the ugliest uniforms. I think they're one of the cooler ones, to be honest with you, especially the helmets. Very unique. And Scott, you may very well be right. From what I understand, there's Siberian tigers that are orange and black. There are Bengal tigers that are orange and black. I don't exactly, I'm not a zoologist, but I don't exactly know how the white tigers come about, but from what I know, they're just kind of called white tigers. But they could be a specific breed of Siberian tiger, Bengal tiger. But to me, the thing is that they're the Bengals, they're orange and black. I like that. There's one thing that, and Connor, I'll get to you in a second. There's one thing that I did like, and I'll put the link in our YouTube chat. Is a kind of a different look on the orange and black helmet that could be a cool mix up. It's basically reversing the stripes of the helmet. So it's mostly an orange helmet with kind of the thin black stripes. There's kind of more of the thicker black stripes that takes up most of the helmet, and the orange stripes are a little less prominent. I would like to see that kind of mixed in. I do like the idea of maybe having a white and black helmet with those color rush uniforms, but white and black is kind of almost the absence of color, so it kind of takes away from the color rush theme. Connor, what do you think?
I like the idea of the all white and black color rush. To be honest, I really didn't mind the orange helmets. I thought that was kind of cool. The white and black, I think, would have been kind of overkill, but I think a lot of people probably disagree with me there. And I saw this in the chat. People are talking that the Bengals should bring back 1980s uniforms. I mean, and that'd be cool. I think to be honest, I think the Bengals need uniform upgrades. I think their helmets are probably top in the league. Their jersey and their pants, I'm not a big fan of. But I think what would be awesome the 1980s, like with the orange helmets with Bengals on the side. I think that'd be sick. And just having that through, I think the Bengals need it's not because the Bengals just don't do that. And in their defense, the league is so like. The league is so hard in terms of they just make it so hard for teams to do stuff like that. But I think it'd be really, really cool to see the Bengals wear throwback uniforms just like once a year or something like that. And those would definitely entail a throwback helmet, which I would prefer the throwback uniforms with the throwback helmet, and then the color rush uniform with the current helmet versus the color rush uniform with the color rush helmet, and then a throwback uniform with the current Bengals helmet. It'd be really cool. I do, though, on that note, I think the Bengals, like I said, I think it'd be awesome for them to do a uniform upgrade at some point. I don't like the stripes on the side of the jerseys really bother me. I think they need to get a little fresher, or something a little more like old fashioned, like a lot of teams have done, where it's very simple. The helmets are awesome, but the uniforms I think could upgrade.
Yeah, they did upgrade him a few years back, and some people like some people prefer the leaping tiger, some people prefer the bee, some people prefer the tiger face. Personally speaking, I like the tiger face. Obviously, it's not something I want to see on their helmets. I like the helmets the way they are, but
for sure,
I think they could get a little creative. Mix and match your uniforms a little bit. But cool question from Waldo. Just kind of, in such a couple of months of seriousness with the Bengals and their news and what they've done, it's kind of a nice refreshing look at what they could do in terms of being kind of creative. And some of this stuff you guys mentioned Oregon, University of Oregon. Yeah, that's way overkill, but kind of getting creative, especially when you've got younger guys on the team and showing this kind of cool way of mixing and matching uniforms and kind of looking fresh and cool and unique. That guys kind of get hyped up for that, and it could be something they look at, especially since they're such a conservative, kind of old school driven football team. But thanks to Waldo for that question. Guys, we've got a couple more. I received an email from Stephen Vovak, and Stephen said some kind words. He loves the show, he said, and I greatly appreciated it. He wrote me a long email, and there's a lot of questions, a lot of stuff to digest in it. We can't get to it all tonight, but one of the top things he said was, with today's depth chart, what are the most obvious holes in the Bengals roster as it currently stands? And I think it's a pertinent question since we had Joe Goodberry on earlier. We talked about the draft, the 11 picks they have, what they have and haven't done in free agency. So, Scott, I'll start with you. As this team currently stands and as they prep for the draft, what are their biggest roster holes that the team is currently looking at?
I think there's obviously many ways we can go at this, and I think we could spend hours probably going over every single, I think almost every position, unless they have a Atkins or a Green as a whole. But I'm going to focus on two of them. One of them is offensive line, specifically offensive tackle. I am very optimistic that Andre Smith is going to be able to replace Zeitler, maybe not at his level, but at something comparable. And I'm hoping that Bowling comes back to his level now that he should be fully healed from the injury that was kind of nagging him all last year. Bodine seemed to take a few steps forward last year. Hopefully, he won't be any worse. But then you have left tackle, right tackle, which I think are the two big ones. We struggled at right tackle mightily. Winston's not getting any younger. You have to hope with Wahe and Fisher, someone can step up. Obviously, Whitworth's gone. So to me, that's positionally, that's probably the biggest hole, is what are we going to do there? And it's right now, it's basically, just hopeful optimism that someone can take a huge step up and be productive. The other position I'm going to throw out is kicker, because I personally don't see, Nugent struggled forever. He had all sorts of misses. He started missing extra points left and right after missing field goals for the last 4 or 5 years. Bullock is marginally better, if that, but and I know a lot of people are saying, we need to draft Zane Gonzalez. Well, there's probably 28 teams that would probably be happy to draft Zane Gonzalez. So there's no guarantee we're going to get him, even if we'd, plan on going as high as the 4th or 5th round. No one expected Aguayo to go in the 2nd round when Tampa Bay took him last year. So there's no guarantee we're getting Zane Gonzalez. And if we don't get him, okay, you're probably looking at Bullock and the kid from LSU who's never kicked a field goal in college or the pros, battling it out. So I think kicker is a big hole, because with Bullock, I think we're probably looking at more of the same at that position. So I'd probably say those are the two biggest holes that I would see. And at some point you could argue, we probably have as many holes as the Michigan Interstate. And yeah, we do. But those would be the two biggest. Those are the potholes that are so big that they would swallow your car, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. I'll kick it over to Connor, who looks like he's having a little blackout there. I don't know what's going on there, buddy. But
yeah, maybe my room's lights don't work.
Yeah, maybe pay your electric bill and get going with it.
Yeah, I'm a blogger, man. But I think, yeah, I think the team's biggest holes are definitely defensive end. I think Joe Goodberry said it well. Even if it's just a rotational standpoint, if you think Michael Johnson's a starter, okay, well, all you have behind him and Dunlap right now are Will Clark and Wallace Gilberry. It doesn't make sense that the Bengals would go into the season with those 4 guys, more so than any other position, I would say, on the roster by a long shot. People are going to say receivers a big need. I don't think it is. I do think another big need would be running back. Not necessarily for, it's just going to be a hole that the Bengals fill in the draft at some point. And hopefully that guy can be a capable player. But I think you need a guy who can play special teams like Rex Burkhead did for so long, for the 4 years he was here. But you want a guy who can eventually replace Cedric Pierman as that the punt protector and kind of just the ace in special teams. And Burkhead seemed like he was going to be that guy, but now that he's gone, you need a guy to fill Burkhead's role on special teams, and it's kind of a low, it's like an underrated need, but it really it's something that the Bengals need to look at. And then one more need, I guess I'll go something on offense. You need a left tackle at some point. Such a good boy, he's there. He's going to be the guy, whether you like him or not. But even if you look at the roster, okay, well, who's backing him up there? Eric Winston? No, probably not, because he's playing right tackle. Jake Fisher? Well, then who's playing right tackle? So you need another offensive tackle for sure. But I would specify left tackle as a guy who, I don't know, maybe not so much a developmental player, but more so a guy sure bet to be solid, which isn't really what you would, I guess, be looking for in a draft, because you want all these high profile, high ceiling type of guys, but maybe a guy who could become the next Anthony Collins for the Bengals.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you guys. I'm gonna go with my boy K Rhodes in the YouTube chat room. K Rhodes, I see you, buddy. I see you. A wide receiver to stretch the field opposite of AJ Green. And granted, the team, that's what he wrote, by the way. I don't mean to plagiarize all of his words without giving him credit, but I agree with him. And whether it's John Ross in the draft, whether it's Corey Davis, whether it's Mike Williams, you heard earlier from Joe Goodberry, his take on Corey Davis and John Ross versus Mike Williams. Somebody with big speed, somebody that can really bring excitement to this offense. I've said this over the past couple of weeks on this show now. If you look at when AJ Green went down, when Tyler Eifert was out of the offense towards the end of this last year, and for Eifert's situation towards the beginning of the year, you see that defenses were not giving them any kind of respect for a deep ball. Everything was underneath. Everything was yards after the catch, and most of it was a very boring vanilla offense. Some of that is on Ken Zampese. Some of that is on attrition of his personnel, his star personnel players on that side of the ball. But at some point, you got to have guys that can do things if one of those guys go down again. And, people can say what they want about Marvin Jones, but he was a good complementary weapon to AJ Green. And the Bengals need another player like that, I think. We talked earlier about how the defense seemed to be playing pretty well towards the end of last year and giving up minimal points. So it seems as if the team kind of needs to get a little more explosive on offense and have another couple of players who are long-term, signed long-term beyond AJ Green, who's now approaching 30, and Brandon LaFell, who is over 30 years old, and are both under contract now. So, I think that's one of the needs. I definitely don't disagree with either of you guys as well. Pass rusher, I think even a rotational one is something they should look at too. But that is our take on that question. Appreciate it. We're going to get out of here. Before I do want to say a thank you to Joe Cook, who sent me an email. It was more of a comment email on AJ McCarron trade, so it's not really a question for us to answer, but really appreciate the thoughts that he put into it. And he tunes into Cincy Jungle and this program, so appreciate it. And guys, we're going to get out of here. Before we do, I just want to say thanks again to the listeners. Thanks to Joe Goodberry again. Hate to keep plugging it, but we want you to make sure you get the material that we put out there and enjoy it. We're on YouTube. We're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. We're on Twitter. We're on Cincy Jungle. So check us out. Shoot us an email. We would love to hear from you. Any final thoughts, gentlemen? Scott, I'll shoot it to you, because unfortunately we can't see your face this week. I'm so bummed. That's 2 weeks in a row, man.
Well, I'm hoping to get that fixed next week with a computer. Anyway, yes, I do have a final thought. I think it's final. That one thing I was thinking of, we were talking about Bengals and we were talking about his April Fool's stuff. I have to assume Bengal Tigers are from Bengal, which is a state in India, kind of like Kerala and Maharashtra and some of their states.
They are.
So that being the case, if they're from India, I'm really hoping that our Hindi-speaking fans won't be saying "Tum Bahut Pago Ho Bengal" this April Fool. Which would be if one of those April Fool's headlines became a reality. So I just want to give a shout out to any. I know we have a global audience. I know we have fans all across the world. So if there are any fans in India watching, I'll just offer them a Bahut Acha Din and kind of leave it at that, I guess.
Sure.
You are Scott Schulze is cosmopolitan, folks. He is definitely into. Oh, he's in tune with all the cultures. And for those of you that don't know, the handful of hosts of us, we have a little side chat that we talk and make sure that we're on task and keep up with what's going on in the show. And Scott, earlier in the show, I was making sure, hey, do you have a question for Joe, that sort of thing. And he was sending me responses that I could not understand. And he's like, oh, that's Hindu, that's Sanskrit. And I'm like, what are we talking about here? This is unbelievable. So this ties in perfectly, Scott. I love how you just put a nice little bow, a nice little ribbon on the show here. That was very nice.
Well, the thing I was putting in the chat was it's pronounced TK. It's basically their version of OK, but it's spelled nothing like the letters T and K.
Okay.
So I wasn't being phonetic. I was actually kind of spelling out the Hindi, which I know I can't type the Hindi. I don't have a Hindi keyboard, but yeah, so that's what that was. And just for the few fans who don't speak Hindi, Tum Bahut Pago Ho Bengal basically means you are very crazy Bengals. And I had to throw the Bahut in there because if any of those happen, it's obviously very.
I love it.
Just Pago Ho.
I love it. And for those fans that are more in the generation of Scott and I know we're talking more Hindi, but you also mentioned, I believe, Sanskrit earlier, Scott. Was I wrong about that? Was it Sanskrit?
About what?
In our little side chat, was it Sanskrit or was it Hindi you were talking to me?
No, Hindi.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, never mind then.
I can't speak Sanskrit.
Okay. Well,
but I do Hindi.
For those who are old school Bengal fans like myself and Scott, look up Kajana Carter's name. His first name is Sanskrit, I believe. So, little Google search homework for you, courtesy of the Orange and Black Insider. Connor, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I have a couple, and it's draft.
Are they going to be in English?
Yeah, they will.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So someone on Twitter said, name your 5 prospect crushes in the 2017 NFL draft. I only have 3, but these 3 guys, keep your eye out on them. They're big names, greatly be in the draft at some point. Okay, you've got Taco Charlton, obviously my boy. Then you've got Corn Elder, and you've got Fish Smithson. So, Bengals, Fish Smithson in round 7. Start the movement. Fish Smithson, we want Fish.
That's yeah. I mean, you can go if you get Taco and I don't know. Anyway, let's not go there.
That would make more sense if the draft was during Lent.
Correct.
But I think Lent ends by then.
And
we want Fish.
Unfortunately, Connor, Chris Berman, I believe, is retiring, and he would have a field day with guys like that on the Bengals if he was still around. But I guess he's not going to be. But thanks for joining me, you guys, tonight. And Connor, I know you hopped on late and you had a lot of stuff to do. I appreciate you joining us. Thanks to Joe Goodberry. He brought it tonight. I know we went a little long, but we wanted to make sure we got to fan questions not only to him, but at the end of the show that we normally answer as well. We appreciate all of your interaction. Check us out on all the mediums we mentioned, and go read some of the comments by Marvin Lewis and Mike Brown over the past couple of days and try not to tear your hair out. For Connor Howe, Scott Schulze, I'm Anthony Cosenza. This has been the Orange and Black Insider. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.